And how does that now look?
Perfect.
Okay, so let's go over here. So the one thing with always demoing Marketing Cloud is you just kind of have to keep
Yeah.
moving the mouse around, otherwise it'll log you
Yeah.
out. So I'm gonna,
While you're doing that, we are live, so I'll go ahead and I'll kick us off, and then you can set up the demo on your end. But if you're just joining us, hello everyone, welcome. So excited to have you on day 3 of March Dreamin'. My name is Kayla, and from Conte, I'll be moderating today's session. Just a few housekeeping items before we get started. Yes, these sessions will be recorded and available on demand after the event. We'll also be following up via email with all of the content today. If you do have a question, don't be shy, post it in the chat. You can also post it in the Q&A, which is right above your chat on the right-hand side. And yeah, now let's get started. My pleasure to introduce you to our speaker today, Pratik, who has an awesome session ready for us, all about unleashing the power of personalization, a $4.5 million case study. So Pratik, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you, Kayla, and thank you everyone for being here. I really appreciate you guys taking the time out of your day on a busy Friday to listen to me talk. So I appreciate that. And as Kayla mentioned, we're going to be talking today about really unleashing the power of one-to-one personalization at scale. And we're going to kind of review a case study that my company recently went through, and how we got to that point where we were able to generate that $4.5 million uplift, specifically uplift, which is a really key word here that we're going to go through in a very short amount of time using the strategy and framework that we're going to review today. That being said, I'm Pratik Desai. I am the founder of One to One, a Salesforce partner in the ecosystem, and formerly the practice lead for personalization at Salesforce. Cool. Well, we wouldn't be here today without our sponsors. So just a huge thank you to them for even allowing us to conduct any of this, and all of us bringing us all together. So thank you to them, and yeah, thank you. All right, and let's go through the agenda. So I absolutely recommend, if you have any questions, concerns, or anything like that that you want me to address, put those in the chat anywhere throughout this presentation, any slide. Go ahead and put it in the chat. I'll try to address it there and then of course we'll try to reserve some time at the end for Q&A if there's any questions that have not been addressed, or potentially questions that you're just reserving for the end. No worries there. So let's go through the agenda. The first and foremost is it's really hard to know where you're going if you don't understand what your challenge is, what you're trying to solve for. And that's really key, because a lot of times when we're starting to talk about personalization, specifically Salesforce's personalization tool, there's a lot of predetermined notions of what use cases you have to go after, what use cases you should be doing, and what was pre-sold as part of the tool itself. And I think it's really important to understand what challenges are we trying to solve, where's our biggest opportunity. So we'll talk about that today. And then it kind of lends itself to, where do we start, right? If we understand the opportunity, we understand the biggest opportunities in the room, that's where we start. That allows us to know where we start. But how do we start to peel back the onion around the overall goal that everyone's going to tell us? Right? We're here for revenue. Well, what does that mean? Where do we start? How do we actually generate revenue? This largely lends itself to a conversation of what we call the business value map. Talk a little bit about that framework and how to implement it with your particular patterns and use cases, and when you're out there in the wild. We'll talk a little bit about that. And then using that framework, you're going to come up with a holistic list of use cases, how to prioritize them, how to create a roadmap. We'll talk about kind of where that brings us and how to take that forward. And then I'm going to show you a demo, right? I think just seeing it live, seeing is believing, being able to kind of articulate it is important, but being able to then actually take it to that next level and practically see it and be able to show it is, I think, super key. So we're gonna wrap off the session with that. Cool. All right, let's go into it. So what is the challenge? You've probably seen this slide a million times, and I'm going to show it to you again because it's super important, right? As I said, it's really hard to know where you're going if you don't understand where you're starting. And where we're starting in the ecosystem, in the wild, is largely disconnected data silos, which create a super unclear understanding of our customer. What do I mean by data silos, right? Is all of the tracking from your web, your email, Commerce Cloud, your CRM, your data warehouse, all your analytics, none of that's brought together, none of that's stitched together. We have an unclear understanding of what a customer is doing if all of those channels are not stitched into a single profile. And I'm not talking stitched 24 hours later. I'm not talking stitched 48 hours later, right? That does not help us in the act of the actual session that's being conducted. I'm talking about stitched in the moment to be able to react to this person just switched from web to mobile, or hey, they just clicked on an email, landed on the website. We want to be able to react to that. What email did they click? Where on the email did they click? Why? What was the context of that link itself? And now what web pages are actually browsing through? All of this needs to be resolved and stitched in real time for us to act on it with any sort of relevance, right? So if we can't do that, we're essentially saying we have a disconnected data silo. So that then brings us to, if we have an unclear understanding of the customer, we're going to conduct inconsistent experiences across the customer journey. What does that really mean there? Well, it means if we have an unclear understanding of what the customer is doing, where they're hopping from, right? Someone clicks on email, gets to the web. Well, the web now has no idea what they clicked on. So the web is just going to show them a static, we in the email world, we talk a lot about batch and blast. It's almost like a batch and blast experience of the web. Everyone sees the same web experience regardless of where they came from, regardless of the behavior they've actually conducted in the last few minutes, last few seconds. Well, it's almost the same as batch and blast. We're not actually reacting to what our customer is doing. So that's where we start to create inconsistent and static brand experiences across all our channels, email, web, mobile, you name it, whatever POS system, whatever is relevant to your particular organization that you're working with, you're creating an inconsistent experience. Okay, so what does that mean? What we now understand the challenge, we understand what we're dealing with. How do we actually solve for it? Like, what does that look like from a Salesforce platform perspective? So Salesforce's personalization platform does exactly what we're talking about in terms of solution, right? It takes all of your channels, everything that your customer can interact with, and ports it into a single unified customer profile in real time, so that all web behavior, all your email behavior, let's say call center engagement, you can kind of see that there on the left, call center engagement, advertising click-throughs, sales and service engagement, mobile engagement, all of your engagement across all of your customer profile, customer channels, as long as they can hit a REST API or integrate with an SDK, can be listened to in real time and stitched against a profile. And that kicks off a very quick but very important process, which is understand what you just told us, understand the behavior that was just conducted, decide what to do with that, and then activate, or what's on the screen here called engage, activate that against a particular channel. So let's say someone just clicked on a particular web experience. We need to understand that they just clicked on that, decide what to do with it, either AI-based decision or rules-based decision. We'll see a little bit about that in the demo a little bit later, but let the AI decide what to do with this information, or let us as marketers decide if this action occurs, react in this certain way, and then take that determination and send it back to the channel that's being engaged with at that moment and say, this is the right thing to show them at the right time. So if we talked about the problem being, we don't know what they're clicking, we don't know how they got here, we don't know what they're doing in real time to be able to react to it, then the solution that Salesforce gives us here is, I just clicked on an ad and that ad landed me on your website. Knowing what ad that was and getting to that website in real time now allows us to say, I know you just got here by clicking this ad. So I'm not going to show you a static version of this website. I'm going to react to the fact that you just clicked on an ad for, let's say, Salesforce's Marketing Cloud platform, and you got to salesforce.com, clicking on that particular ad. I'm going to show you a homepage hero banner that specifically talks about the value proposition of Marketing Cloud. I'm not going to show you Service Cloud. I'm not going to show you Sales Cloud. You clicked on an ad for Marketing Cloud. That's what I'm going to show you on this homepage. It's really important to react to the relevancy, It's really important to react and be relevant to the thing that's happening in the moment. And this is the solution here. So underpinning all of that obviously is an AI engine, and we want to be able to analyze the results of our campaigns. Super important to sense and respond, right? We might get it wrong. The AI might get it wrong. It's really important to be able to react to that. And so, of course, understand, decide, engage. Underpinning all of that is this idea of test and experiment, right? Analyze your results. Let's say you set that up. Someone clicks a Marketing Cloud ad, gets to Salesforce.com. Now we show them things about Marketing Cloud. Well, that's not working. Why? Why are the click-throughs not being upticked? Maybe we're showing them the wrong thing. The ad for Marketing Cloud is specifically around emails, and when they get to the homepage, we're showing content that's specifically around mobile. So that's probably something we can improve, but it gets us closer and closer to this idea of experimentation and relevancy. Right? And the last thing that's important here from a solution perspective is you can activate and listen on any channel. And theoretically, and in practice, you would listen across all channels and be able to activate on that across all channels. So it doesn't have to be the same channel that's being listened to is being activated on. As I mentioned, you can click an ad, get to a website, immediately react to it on the website. You can then, if someone goes from the website to mobile, immediately react to the fact that they're now on mobile. All right, let's move on to the next step here. So we're talking, of course, specifically around strategy and actually realizing the value. So that was it as far as I'm going to talk about the technicals. Right now, let's talk about kind of how do you realize the value of this platform? How do you realize the value of this pattern? I think a lot of the issues that we've seen in the market is that there's a predetermined notion of if you're going to do personalization, you have to do abandoned cart. If you're going to do personalization, you have to do X, Y, Z, right? Whatever's relevant to your particular industry or vertical or whatever it is. I would say that's the wrong way to think about personalization, right? So I'm gonna go out on a limb and say the right way to think about personalization is to analyze what your biggest opportunity is. How do we do that? The first step to analyzing what your biggest opportunity is having a data-driven understanding across your customer funnel. Now, the customer funnel I'm putting in front of you today is largely around e-commerce, but I would argue every industry vertical has some sort of customer funnel, right? And if we analyze that particular customer funnel, with the example we have in front of us today with Rachel in the center, it's onboarding all the way to retention. So the important thing for this funnel is to understand, do we have an onboarding problem? Do we have a discover problem? Compare, convert, expand, retain problem? And potentially we might have multiple problems. And that's where I think people get tripped up is immediately we go to, well, let's just do the conversion problem, which is abandoned cart. And what we find time and time again in the industry is that might generally not be the largest problem in the game. Why? Yes, most e-commerce vendors have an abandoned cart problem, or most industries will have an abandoned form problem. But it doesn't necessarily mean it's your largest opportunity. So we'll talk about that in a second. Let's go to the next slide. So it's really important, as I said, to understand where your biggest problems occur. And that's why it's really important to have a business value map. Just because the platform gives you X, Y, Z, candidly, the platform gives you a ton of value, a ton of use cases. And it's really hard. You'll see a slide later on where it lists off a ton of use cases that can be done. It's really hard to know where to start, and I think that's where a lot of folks just kind of earmark towards the typical standard patterns in the industries they're in. But it's really important, instead of doing that, to map back those platform capabilities to your overall business goals. And I'm not talking about just revenue, right? Revenue is everyone's business goal. I'm talking about peeling back the onion, right? A life cycle, data-driven, informed business goals map. And we'll talk about what that looks like on the next slide here, but it's really about peeling back the onion. What does it mean to want to uplift revenue, right? How are we actually going to do that across the life cycle? So if we actually start to analyze it, right, everyone wants revenue. Let's peel back the onion. Wanting revenue to us, particularly in our pattern, means we need to do a 10% increase in site traffic because we have a low amount of site traffic. right? That's not abandoned cart. That's an onboarding problem. We need to increase 7% in cross-category consumption, right? We're really good at converting, but we're not really good at cross-category conversion, right? Where does that loyalty look like? We want 3% reduction in cart abandonment. So of course, cart abandonment's a problem, but is it the largest problem here? And we want 10% growth of loyalty program memberships, kind of related to our cross-category consumption, but maybe not necessarily someone always having bought. We want to show the value of our loyalty program. So further peeling back the onion, we start then to have a map of, okay, everyone wants revenue. What does that mean for us as marketers and our particular objectives and key KPIs? And where does it map to the life cycle stage? So 10% increase in life cycle is an onboarding problem. Cart abandonment decrease is a conversion problem. Cross-category consumption is an expansion problem, and loyalty is a retention problem. And as we start to overlay our particular data points, one industry example, and it's of course going to come a little bit later, where we start to talk about the use case and the case study we're here to talk about, but one industry pattern that we've seen is that potentially abandoned cart might not be your biggest problem. And here's an example. We recently talked to someone where they said absolutely abandoned cart's a problem. Yeah, that's true. Abandoned cart was a problem for them. But 60% of their users that came to the site never actually viewed a product. And if they never viewed a product, they never got to the point where they added to cart. And 60% is a very large number. So if we could uptick the amount of people that did not bounce after getting to their website and figure out why is it that they don't actually view a product? How did they get there with the intent of visiting the website but never actually viewing a product? How are they getting there and why are they bouncing? If we can solve that challenge, then we can force folks down the funnel to product viewers, add to carters, and purchasers. They're still going to have the same amount of percentage of abandoned carts, but a much larger percentage are going to get to the point of abandoned carting and converting, versus if we solved the abandoned cart problem, which was a much smaller percentage, because they had a really good rate of people that added to cart and converting them. If we can force folks down the funnel from the top, we actually increase revenue much higher than solving the abandoned cart problem. And now we're starting to understand that the biggest opportunity in the room wasn't abandoned cart. And if we could solve the onboarding problem first, we have a much larger period of much higher revenue, of a much more valuable use case to solve. And that's where we start to talk about what's the priority of all these use cases. Right. So if we kind of move to the next slide here, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, there's a whole host of use cases and all of these things that we can do from a pattern perspective. Now, this is not a holistic list. Feel free to kind of take this forward as a kind of industry best practices, but I want to make it clear this is not a holistic list of use cases. What this is one example of a exercise where we took the use cases that we know this product can conduct by solving the disparate data problem. Once we've solved that disparate data problem, we need to figure out what are the right personalization patterns to conduct for them. These are all the use cases we came up with that we believed were relevant to this particular organization. And then based on overlaying their particular data-driven pain points, we figured out what are the biggest opportunities and thematically mapped these particular use cases to those themes and decided on the value of those use cases based on their data-driven pain points. So you start to see some use cases bubble to the top left or top right, which means they have the highest business value possible for this particular organization, right? And you might not be able to see all the numbers here, but I can tell you abandoned journey's in there somewhere, but it's not alone. Abandoned cart is not the most valuable, if not the only valuable thing that they could go after. In fact, it is not the most valuable for this particular organization. And you can see here that there's things that are much more low-hanging fruit compared to an abandoned cart journey. And I don't mean to devalue abandoned cart by any means. I'm picking on it because it's the one that everyone jumps to when they say personalization. But for example's sake, there's a ton of value of other use cases up on the top here, and then we overlaid it as their partner, as their Salesforce partner, overlaid it with the complexity based on what we know of their ecosystem, their technical challenges, their operational challenges for content, and their operational challenges. We overlaid it with what we believed would be the complexity for them, and now we have a roadmap. What does the roadmap actually start to look like here? Well, it's the things that are on the top left, the highest business value, lowest complexity. That's your priority items. Those are the ones that are going to solve the biggest pain points you have for the lowest amount of investment and complexity. The top right stuff has a tremendous amount of business value, but going to cause you to have a little bit of a higher operational spend, either internally or with us. So we should start to plan for that immediately and start figure out where that lies on your roadmap. And then if we get to the bottom stuff, anything lower than that first line below 8, if we get to that at some point, we get to it, right? But for your organization, by mapping the key capabilities to the key KPIs, we believe those are not items of value right now. So we have our roadmap on the top, and we know prioritization from left to right because it's based on complexity. All right, so now let's move to a use case. So we can see here that specifically, if we start to look at how this got conducted by a particular exercise that we ran with a particular client, what happened, right? I think it's really important to see it in practice. It's really, really, I guess, exciting to talk about and say this is the right way to do it, but seeing results is believing, and it's super important to understand what kind of results can we drive by thinking about it this way, by giving it more of an approach of key capabilities, key KPIs, mapping them together. And when we actually have done this exercise in the wild, this is just one story of many that we've created. When we've done this in the wild, this client was someone that was sold this tool with a predetermined notion of the use cases they should go after because they've seen other competitors do it, and they're absolutely were sold that they should do it as well because every e-commerce vendor is doing it. And the reality was when we got into their data and we started looking at their actual pain points, we absolutely disagreed that those were the use cases to go after. And that's why we created that map for them and said, you know what, those are not the right use cases. They are valuable to you, but they are not the lowest complexity, highest business value use cases we can conduct with this tool immediately right now to get you as much value out of the gate as possible. And when we bubbled it all to the top, 3 use cases were the most valuable use cases to them that we were able to say we can get this up and running in a very quick amount of time, because remember, complexity determines priority. And we could get these out the door in a very, very quick amount of time, and then run a 10-week pilot to see were we right? The business value is a hypothesis. Were we right in being able to say this is the most value to you? And can we then further iterate and optimize these use cases by giving the AI more content, by potentially running a champion challenger type refinement of those particular use cases to start to A/B test and actually increase the value coming out of the pilot period. So in the pilot, we decided we're going to run these 3 use cases for 10 weeks. A lot of them were recommendations based. Some of them were AI content. Some of them were AI products. We went forward with those use cases, and we were able to measure that against their static experience that they were driving today, we uplifted 4.5 million in incremental revenue compared to what they would have done by A/B testing in that 10-week period. Now, license costs are varying, but this is a tremendous amount of ROI for a license that they had just agreed to for 4 years. And they resulted in that for the first 10 weeks of the pilot, which means anything after in terms of incremental lift is now just paying for the tool and then some. Every additional use case that they go after is starting to pay for the tool and then some, right? Because it's not incremental spend for every new use case, but it is incremental lift. And what we also found was these 3 use cases were not the most optimized. So coming out of the 10-week period, for about the next 20 weeks, we actually just iterated champion challenger style, iterated and iterated and iterated. We were actually able to squeeze even more value out of these use cases by slightly refining them, accounting for seasonality, accounting for new product launches, and factors and macroeconomics, et cetera, we were able to squeeze even more value of these use cases. Now we're just seeing tremendous ROI, and we're not doing much. And then, of course, the new road mapping workshop is that matrix that we showed you earlier. Top left was about 11 use cases. Top right was about 8 use cases. And on the bottom, there were 6 and 6 based on complexity. Those top left use cases, the 11, we didn't even touch yet. And now we can do 11 more use cases in a similar pattern to continue to create that ROI that we saw in the first 3 use cases. There's 8 use cases out there that are higher in complexity, but now the justification on operational spend for us as a partner is easy. So we just showed you 4.5 million incremental revenue. Why not spend the money to get us to do those other 8 higher complexity, higher cost, but still tons of value use cases? It's a no-brainer. We've shown you the value of the tool. We've shown you an ROI already, and we've given you a business case as to why our partnership should continue to grow. So it's a win all around. All right, so let's now kind of talk about if there's something you're taking away from this, what are those things, right? I think the biggest importance, if you're taking anything away from this, there's 4 lenses as to what makes this important. From a personalization standpoint, how do you squeeze the value of personalization, especially around the Salesforce Marketing Cloud personalization tool? What are the 4 big takeaways? I think the first one is kind of self-explanatory, and candidly, I think it's been kind of driven into everyone already, which is why I didn't spend too much time on it, which is data, right? Data in, data out. It's super important. It's super important for this AI to be able to stitch all this together, to be able to really understand what is it that we're listening to, how do we decide on it, how do we activate on it. All of that needs to be seamless. I think we spend a lot of time as an industry talking about making sure all the data there's data integrity, there's data excellence. I think that's awesome. And if you take that away from today, great, that's perfect. The second thing that I intended to hammer home today is that the one item that tends to be left behind is operations. And that's what I spent most of today talking about, right? It's really important to get the data right and the piping right for this platform, but it's also really important to get the operations right. So what does that mean? It's not just about process, but it's also about making sure you're installing the right mindset around personalization. So that means it's not just all of these competitors are doing this, which means we must have a mandate to do that as well. It's what are our biggest pain points? What are our biggest opportunities? We need to solve that. And that comes with a mindset shift of it doesn't have to just be XYZ use case. It has to be pertinent. It has to be particularly relevant to our pain points. And then also operational excellence around content, right? It's really, really easy to get the data right. It's really easy to get the use cases right. But that's really hard to have content to actually activate on those use cases. So just make sure that's kind of on top of mind. All right, so where do we go from there? Number 3 takeaway from today's session is test and learn, right? Be really, really, put on the beginner's mindset. Be willing to learn and realize that your hypothesis might be wrong. So if your use case XYZ is what you want to go after, be willing to understand and accept the analytics saying, hey, this is not moving the needle, and quickly iterate, right? So that kind of 3 and 4 go together here, which is be nimble. Number 4 is just be willing to test and learn, champion challenger style, put out some use cases, understand what's working, understand what's not working, and then quickly iterate on those use cases, champion challenger style, to figure out, okay, if this isn't the thing, right? someone clicks on a Marketing Cloud ad and we now are showing the Marketing Cloud. Why are we not getting uplift here? Quickly be nimble on understanding that and iterate on what's next. Oh, well, you know what? Someone clicked on an email Marketing Cloud ad. They got to the website, we're showing them something about mobile. Right? There's something to be learned there. There's something to be quickly fixed there as well. All right, that is the summary. I do want to show you a demo here, right? So I'm just gonna quickly move my demo off. So we're gonna actually go into the tool. And apologies, I did get logged out of Marketing Cloud, so I am just quickly running back into it. But we're gonna go into the personalization tool. The first thing I want to show you is a little bit about data excellence, right? Making sure you're listening to the things that are happening to be able to react to it in real time. As part of this demo, I'm going to give you something that's not e-commerce, because I think we spend a lot of time talking about e-commerce in the personalization world, but it's not only relevant to e-commerce. So we're gonna dive into the world of FinServe. And when we dive into the world of FinServe, we're going to use Salesforce's Cumulus Financial Services website. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to trick it into thinking I'm a brand new user. And so we're going to watch the event stream and see what happens when a brand new user lands on the Cumulus FinServe website. What is it doing, right? And just to give you context on what I'm going to react to is I'm going to react to the things that I'm actually clicking on. And typically in FinServe, you have kind of a waterfall of a mandate in personalization. Number one is you have to show these things because the government, either federally or statewide, is mandating that we have to show these things a certain amount of times. Number two, you have strategic necessities because your corporate leadership is saying, I want to show this to our customers a certain amount of times. Then once you've passed those and said, okay, I've done my due diligence, I've shown those things a certain amount of times. Number three is going to be, I can now show anything I want and I can react. So what I've set up for you here today is number three is going to either be AI-based or behavioral-based. If the right action's been conducted, I'm going to show you, as a marketer, I'm going to take control and I'm going to show you something. Otherwise, I'm going to let the AI take the reins and show you whatever it needs. Of course, I got logged out again. Let's log back in. So in Cumulus, on the website, I'm a brand new user. And I'm going to land on it. And I slowed everything down here so you can see the AI, so you could see the engine take control. You saw the static image and you saw it replaced with something else. Now, it's slow on purpose because I want you to see the action. In practice and in the wild, you would not want it to be that slow. You would not want the consumer to be aware that there was something there. But for your purposes, I've slowed everything down so you can see that replacement happen. Right? So the regulatory message that our government's mandated to show for us is this message that I've come up with here. So first, I'm reacting to a user. I'm saying, hey, you're in Philadelphia. This is dynamic, by the way. It is detecting that I am currently in Philadelphia and showing me this message. Now, our government said, for this purposes of this demo, I need to see this 3 times before I can see anything else. So let's just quickly go to our event stream. You can see I'm a brand new user here. I've been shown the regulatory message. So let's click 2 more times. And you can see that static experience gets replaced. Again, I'm slowing it down for demonstration purposes. Now I've seen it twice. Now I'm going to see it a 3rd time. Just jump back over to our event stream. You can see here I saw it another time. The tool refreshes every 15 seconds, so we're just waiting for it to refresh. And I've seen it a 3rd time. So now as a brand new user, I no longer need to see the regulatory message, right? We can move on with our experience. We can move on with the experience that we are creating with the tool. So what's next? As I mentioned, the next thing is the strategic messages that our corporate leadership has determined has to be shown. As long as I've already seen the regulatory, I now qualify for the strategic. So again, I'm slowing everything down so you can see it. You can see the static image now gets replaced with strategic. I, as a consumer, have moved down the particular funnel you're creating for me. So now I'm seeing the strategic messaging. What does that look like in the event stream? the user is now seeing strategic messaging. And you can see this person's on the home page currently. Okay, so our corporate mandate is that every user needs to see this 3 times. Let's do that. Second time, and third time. So now the engine has conducted the regulatory experience, conducted the strategic experience, and we can move into the all bets are off experience, right? Now the AI can take control or behavioral actions. The behavioral actions I've set up for your demonstration today is largely around, if I've abandoned a form, show me something to get me back onto the form so I can finish it. If I've never abandoned a form, let the AI take control and show whatever it wants, optimized to trying to get me to click. So let's just jump back into our event stream. You can see I've seen strategic 1, 2, 3 times. Jump back to the website. I should no longer see regulatory. I should no longer see strategic. I should now see the AI trying to get me to click. You can see the AI is just, I'm going to keep clicking here so you can kind of see the AI just trying to show me different things to try to get me to click through, right? It's trying anything and everything it can. Again, I'm slowing all this down, so it seems weird, but it should not be this slow in practice. I'm slowing everything down for demonstration purposes. You can see it's trying to show me different things to try to get me to click through, right? It's not moving me up or down the funnel because the goal of the AI is set to get me to click on one of these images. I'm just trying to figure out, do I want auto insurance? Do I want a checking account? Do I want a credit card? Right? It's trying to figure out what is it that's going to get me to click here. What are those images? What are the content pieces that need to show me? Well, what happens if I actually create a behavior that puts me into a different part of the funnel? So let's do a mortgage application. Let's go apply. And I'm going to go ahead and put my name, Pratik. Desai. Email is going to be Pratik test November 3rd at yotmail.com. And then we're just going to put whatever phone number there. Let's go ahead and click next. So I've just conducted step 1 of a form. I'm not going to conduct step 2. Let's see what that looks like on the event stream. So we're going to give it time to refresh, that 15-second period to refresh the latest information it knows about this user. But what do we expect to see? We expect to see that I've submitted step 1 of the form, and we expect to see that I've identified myself, right? So you can see here that I did, in fact, submit a pre-approval step 1 submit, and you'll see a step here that says merge. Well, I just identified who I am. So this is now going to take a known profile on the back end, say, I know who this person is, and to stitch it together with all the anonymous activity that I just conducted and say, this known profile is this anonymous user right now. And then last but not least, I'm going to go ahead and click Cumulus to go back to the home page. And what we expect to see here is it saying, you know what? The AI is going to get overridden here. I as a marketer, want to take control. I want to show you, don't step away from that form because you're in a different part of the funnel now. I want you to get back to that form. And it's going to keep showing me that until I click this thing, right? Because we're deep into the funnel. It's not going to stop showing me this until I click. So if I click continue the form, then in fact, go back to homepage, the AI is going to take control again. So what does that look like on here? You can see every time I refresh the homepage, it was showing me abandoned form. Let's refresh the event stream. And you can see I finally clicked the abandoned form campaign, which then put me back into a different funnel because presumably I've met the goal of the campaign. All right, I'm going to pause there and see any questions from the group. Any comments, concerns, anything like that?
I don't see any questions just yet, but that was fascinating. I'm like geeking out over here. I love this stuff.
I appreciate that. Yeah. And while we wait to see if any questions come in, I think a lot of the questions that we get of like, where do we start? I think personalization is so daunting, right? Because it's like, I just showed you web, but like you could do it on a web, you could do it on email, you could do it on mobile, POS. Like it's just so daunting, right? And I think the answer to where do you start is usually it's kind of like the elephant, right? Like how do you eat an elephant, like one bite at a time. I think I would qualify that with like, where's your largest volume, right? That's the first bite you need to take. Personalization is a pattern of three buckets. It's listen, react, activate. So you should listen to the thing that has the largest volume. If that's your web platform, listen on web. If that's your mobile platform, listen on mobile. Like that, your first thing you're listening to should be dictated by your largest volume. The decisions you should be making are based on that business value capability matrix. And the activations of where that's happening should be where your largest volume is, right? So like it's just using that lens, I think it starts to get a little bit more into perspective of like, where do I start and where do I actually apply this methodology to create the right use cases? Yeah. I don't see any questions.
Yeah.
Hopefully it's all clear and hopefully all valuable.
Yeah, well, thank you so much, Pratik. Really appreciate it. If you guys do have questions, you can always reach out directly to Pratik in the messages functionality in Marjorie. And then, of course, this session and resources will be shared with attendees after Marjorie. But yeah, thank you so much again. That was an amazing session. If you want to check out what's coming up next, you guys can head over to like the agenda session up at the top of your screen. There's still a lot of great content as we head into our Friday at Marjorie. But yeah, that's all from us. Have a great weekend, guys. And thank you again, Pratik. I loved this session.
Awesome. Yeah. Have a good Friday. Have a good weekend. Thank you, everyone.
Bye, guys.